Всем привет! Начинаем трансляцию. Сегодня у нас в гостях Saurabh Arora, senior Android инженер с Twitter. Также Saurabh является GDE и ментором других GDE. Формат такой, что сейчас будет презентация, и далее вопросы можно свободно писать на любом языке в чате. Если необходимо, я буду переводить. Please, Saurabh, I'll forward intro to you, and upon your command, I could share the deck. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure, my pleasure, and thank you for having me. Really appreciate getting to speak to another diverse set of audience here. So, hi everyone, I'm Saurabh Arora. As Askar mentioned, I'm a GD in Android, and I'm also a senior software engineer at Twitter, working on the Twitter Android app. I work on the global participation team, and our focus is a lot of bringing Twitter to every region across the world. So I'm really excited in the opportunities that we can provide to everybody in this time at around the world. And outside of meetups, I'm a lot into sports. So I play tennis, squash, badminton. I'm also into fitness. So I do body weight workouts such as calisthenics. So if you even have questions around that at the end of the presentation, I am comfortable to answer them as well. Yeah, so that's my introduction. Askar, we can do the screen share and we can start the presentation.
Yeah.
All right. So today the topic would be what's new in Android 12. Surprise, surprise, it came out August or September last year when Android 12 was finally released out to production for all OEMs to release. I still know that not every OEM out there has released Android 12, and a lot of them are still pushing out their Android 12 releases. So right now it's still a good time for you to make sure that your apps are up to date with Android 12. And we'll, over the course of the next half an hour or so, we'll look at some of the new features that have been released in Android 12 and how you can start supporting your app, start getting apps up to speed to actually support them. All right, so we'll cover three major areas of Android 12 today. So I'd like to divide them into system UI, privacy and security, and app startup and performance related improvements that we'll see in Android 12. So first up, let's look at system UI, right? So Android 12, let's say it's been a decade since Android came out, more than a decade, right? And Android 12 is a big major turning point in Android, given that the Android team has brought a lot of modern and polished UI that brings in, let's say, key changes to make Android feel smoother and faster. While the OS continues to do a lot of work to make it feel smoother and faster as we talk, apps still need to put in some amount of work to implement some of these new features and make the entire Android ecosystem better. So Android 12 is the first step towards the new Material U. So Material was the system design language introduced in Android with Android 5, Lollipop. And over the years, Material has enhanced and refreshed itself with Material 1, then Material 2, and now it's the new chapter in Material design called Material U. It's a new design that will enable users to customize the device and make the app feel more personal. And I don't really have time to really dive into the entire details of what Material U would look like. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend go and watch this YouTube video on what's new in material design on IO, which is a very big in-depth explainer on what this new design language is. So, but we'll still go through some of the technical details about it. So in the first version, the Android team has brought the device theme colors to our app by applying device.theme.device.default.daytime. That's the new device theme that has come up, right? And this will automatically get all the theme colors for you, like background, accent color, primary color, so on. This has already existed. And you could also get a full range of color palettes just from the system resources. So what's new with Android 12 and Material U? It actually goes a step further, and these colors will actually be created based on the user's current wallpaper. So here you see the wallpaper, and the colors that are being provided in my screenshot are actually dynamically pulled from the current wallpaper. This means that your app's theme can actually, if you prefer, sync with the user's wallpaper and present this holistic, seamless, beautiful look as the user transitions from the home screen inside your app, looking similar in color and palette as the wallpaper that the user had chosen, right? So another core feature that in Android is getting much deserved love after all these years, something that's been around in Android 1 since ever, is Android widgets. And in Android 12, finally, it's the time to take widgets and make it better and take it to the next level. So how has that been done? It has been incorporated with Material You, and that really helps to drive your app engagement through increased widget adoption, right? And let's look at some of the tools and resources that the team has provided to make widgets even more easier to build and maintain. So first up, we have support for more interactive elements in the widget, like checkboxes, switches, radio buttons. Widgets now natively support these buttons directly. And better support for tappable controls means users can just engage with your widgets right from the home screen. They don't really need to use widgets as just a display, which then you need to go inside and take an action. You can now do it directly from the widget itself. On top of that, the widget discoverability has also been improved with a revamped widget picker, so you can provide a more accurate description of your widget and a preview layout of how your widget will look on the user's home screen even before they put it over there. So another step that has been taken is that widgets are no longer limited to the home screen. Your widgets will now appear in more places, such as the on-device search. When you search on the Google icon, the Google search bar that you have, widgets can appear in that as a part of search results. It can appear in Assistant on mobile, in Google Assistant. It can also appear in Android Auto. So widgets now have a lot more real estate and user attention and space available inside the Android framework and the ecosystem rather than just the home screen to which it was tied to in Android 11 and before. So as I mentioned earlier, Material You is the big change, and it is now coming to your home screen and also to your widgets. So it provides you consistent color theming capabilities. So Android users and device makers can easily personalize the device colors and theme that extends to apps, and not just apps, as I mentioned, also to widgets. And again, like as apps extend to have the possibility of theming yourself with the wallpaper colors, so can widgets, right? So let's look at a bit of technical code to see how this would be achieved. So in Android 12, there's a number of ways you can customize the look and feel of the widgets. You can make them harmonious alongside other widgets and app icons by introducing system level resources such as allowing the launcher to control the padding and corner radii. What this really means is that you if you have a custom launcher, let's say you install the Pixel launcher or another third-party launcher from your Play Store, you download a third-party launcher. Each launcher has the ability to define how widgets will appear on the home screen. So a launcher could specify, this is my widget radius, this is my widget background, this is my widget padding, and then all widgets will really adopt to that color, padding, and radius to give a consistent look and feel across the entire Android apps. Sorry, entirely across widgets on all your home screen. So adding dynamic colors is also as simple as just changing the color, just setting the correct theme, as you can see from the code base. And here I have a quick animation where you can see as I change the wallpaper, the widget's color will essentially change itself. So you can see here in the animation that the widget looks like a different color. And that is because the widget is actually using the device default day-night theme, which internally will use color extraction techniques to pick out the appropriate color from the wallpaper and apply it to your widget. So your widget looks consistent, seamless, beautiful across any type of wallpaper that the user would like to put on their home screen. Similarly, just like wallpaper supporting colors with wallpapers, in Android 12, you can also make your widget reconfigurable. What reconfigurability means is earlier, if you would need to, if you have a to-do list, right, and you have multiple grouping inside your to-do list, you would want to move from one list section to another, you would actually need to remove the widget and create a new one. In Android 12, widgets can be reconfigurable. So the user can just go inside, select a different widget, different contents for your widget, and it will just automatically replace instead of having to remove that widget and add a new one. And for more resources, more information, check out the Android developer documentation, samples and code labs which run you through exactly on how to get up and started with widgets in Android 12. Another thing, sticking with system UI still, another thing that we would need to look out for is custom notifications. Custom notifications have been deprecated in Android 12, and this is in line with offering a more consistent, immersive, and uniform look across the entire Android ecosystem and across your device. Now, apps would need to use the standard templates which are available in the Jetpack Android X libraries for notification builders. You will need to use that in order to provide a more consistent user experience for notifications, such as the app icon, app name, expansion, and collapse state affordances. And everybody strongly encouraged to update your app's target level SDK to Android S, which is Android 12, and verify that notification layouts look right, including expanded collapse and heads-up notification states. And a quick heads up that I would also like to give here is, even though it's deprecated, you can still use it because it's deprecated, it's not removed. But the advice here would be that you should stop using custom notification templates, because deprecation means it will no longer be supported, and eventually in the future, there's a good chance that this might be removed. Another new impact that we see in Android 12 is the new stretch over scroll. So previously, before Android 12, like if you would scroll at the bottom of your list or to the top or to the recycler view, right, you would see that there's a glow effect when you reach the end, which is like an indicator telling you there's no more to scroll. And this glow has been, I think, since Android 1, like since list was a thing in Android. And it's, as I said, like it's a new visual design language change in Android 12. So this has also changed. For apps targeting Android 12, instead of glow, there will be a stretch effect to represent the overshoot behavior that you've reached the end of the list. There'll be kind of like a stretchy, bouncy behavior. So the goal is to improve upon existing overscroll UX to give it a more natural feel when you're scrolling. The behavior might end up impacting certain custom list or certain behaviors that you might have. For most use cases, my understanding is this shouldn't really make an impact, but there could be that you've added certain behaviors on overstretch and maybe expanding images or some kind of custom behavior that you have. So it's good to test this out inside your scrolling containers, such as list view, recycler view, nested scroll views, whatever scrolling containers that you have. Probably always best to give it a test. And for any new features that you need to test, update your target level SDK to Android 12, and you should be able to see what changes have been made and how it impacts your app, if it does in any way. All right. Yeah, this concludes everything I had about system UI. Let's look at the next section, which is privacy and security. So over the last few years, if you've noticed, right from Android 9, if I'm not mistaken, or was it Android 10, privacy and security has become a recurring theme in Android updates, the focus being that Google wants to make it a more secure and not like Android wasn't a secure system. It's to take it to the next level, make it more secure, make it more private, so you can really trust your device and own it completely. So let's look at some of the main principles that in Android privacy that has been the recurring theme over the last few years. One of them is transparency, which is around what data is accessed by your apps and when do they access it. Next up is providing you controls over that data so you can make informed choices about enhancing or limiting an app's access to their data. And finally, it's about minimizing the data scope of permissions that an app needs, so users are not surprised by the data that this app is accessing and the data that is leaving their devices. So how does Android help make that even better with Android 12? First up, let's look at the transparency principle we talked about. In Android 12, they have added a new microphone and camera access indicators. This will let you know in real time every time an app access your microphone or your camera. You will see these two icons at the top of the screen, whichever is being used, and you would know that, hey, currently some app is accessing my camera and microphone, right? And if the access is not warranted, you can quickly navigate to the system settings of that app and revoke that permission. So in most cases, I would imagine, you would only see these icons when you're actually using these apps in a foreground, right? You're using WhatsApp to make a video call, or using Google Duo to make a video call, or you're using the phones to talk to someone, right? Or using a voice recorder to actually record voice, so you see the microphone access lit up. So at least you know that nobody is trying to snoop you in the background. And you should, and as I mentioned, you should review the use of these microphone and camera permissions when you get them, when you get this indicator. When you scroll down, you will see which app is using it on the notification shape. And if it's something unexpected or surprises you, make sure you go ahead and disable this feature or this permission for the app. All right. And in order to bring you more access to easily being able to control these features, new quick tiles or toggles have been added for mic and camera toggles. So you can quickly disable microphone and camera completely for all apps. So this is not permission level. This is literally saying, turn off my microphone and camera sensors right now. And that would just turn it off for any app which even wants to use it. So the way these apps and the way these toggles are defined is you don't really need to do anything on your app level as long as you continue to follow the best practices of permissions. That is, you always check upfront that you have access to camera or microphone or whatever permission you're trying to access. As long as you do a check upfront that, hey, do I have access to these permissions? And then you access the required feature, this new change would not really impact you. Continue to think of this being similar to the location permission access you have, right? You request for location permission, you get the local permission, you get the location permission, right? And then later, if the user disables the location global setting, your app should still continue to work because it always checks that is the location available, permission available for me or not, rather than assuming that it is available. Even in location cases, the system will prompt the user saying, hey, your permission is off. Sorry, your location permission is on, but your location global setting is off. Do you want to turn this on? Similarly, for camera and microphone, if you disable it via this global toggle, the system will prompt the app at that instance that the system will prompt you when that app tries to access camera and location. So camera and microphone permission, camera and microphone, but you've disabled it in the global state. So the nutshell being, I know it was a long-winded way to say things, but a nutshell being, these new two toggles have been added from a user's perspective, but for apps, as long as you follow the best practices, this change should not impact you. Next up, another change in terms lining with the control principle we talked about. So that was transparency, right? Now we're looking at the control principle. Android 12 brings more control over location sharing permissions. Users will be able to choose the level of location precision granted to your app from the location permission dialog. For most apps and use cases, coarse location permission access should be sufficient. But if you have a specific use case where you actually need fine location for access, and the difference between coarse and fine is coarse is like an approximate location, whereas fine is a very accurate location of the current user. So in case you need fine location access, you can request for it. B, you should also need to account for the fact that the user might deny fine location and will only provide you coarse location. So your app should be compatible enough to work with just coarse location as well. Again, as in line with all principles in Android and improvements across privacy and security, as long as the app follows the best practices, you won't have any trouble adapting to this change. Your app should nearly work as smooth and seamless, even while updating to Android 12. And I've mentioned a bunch of scenarios here. I think we can share the slides after the call, Aksar, if people need to follow some of the resources. But I've mentioned some of, okay. Yeah. But I've mentioned some of the use cases and resources that you can use to test your app with Android 12 later once you really want to start targeting Android 12. And just a quick pointer, as I said, you can still request for find locations. So if you need to just request both of them together, the Android system dialog will take care of handling and providing the correct pop-up with the permission rationale to the user. Yeah, and look for this logcat error that I also figured out, that if you request only find location permission and not course location, you will get this logcat error saying that these two location permissions need to be requested together, even though you only want find. The idea being, falling back to what I said earlier, is user could choose to deny you find and only give you course. So you always need to request both together. And in relation to the location permission, and one of the principles that we mentioned was minimization of data. So you are not concerned about extra data leaving your app, leaving your devices towards your app, even though you believe the app does not need them. Another change that has been made is that apps targeting Android 12 will have the option to decouple Bluetooth scanning from the find location permission for use cases like pairing devices. So you can explicitly say that you require Bluetooth scanning, but you won't be using it to infer location, right? So sometimes people, even like they're doing Bluetooth scanning, they would ask you for location permission. A great example for this is contact tracing apps, right? They would ask you for location permission, even though they're just trying to scan for another devices in the vicinity. So though they don't technically need location permission, just Bluetooth scanning should be sufficient for them. So more fine granular control of data has been added in Android 12. Another point, still sticking with data minimization, there is a good chance that you downloaded some app for a specific use case and then you did not use it for months. Like you have a very rare use case of this app, but you still keep it on your device and you only use it like once in a few months. Android 12 is now smarter, and it builds on the permission auto reset feature from Android 11 and puts apps in a hibernated state. What does hibernated state means? That the system will revoke any previously granted permissions to given to these apps which you have installed on your phone but have not used for a long time. The system will also free up storage by cleaning up the app's cache, because again, you've not used it for a long period of time. Any jobs, push messages will also be stopped, and your app will behave the same as if the user force stopped this app. So the idea is, this you download this app, you did not use it for a while, so there's no reason for it to be kept active and like pinging and consuming your resources because you're no longer using them. And from a developer's perspective, again, if you follow the best practices of Android development, that is always check permissions, do not assume any state your app could be in, always validate. It should not really impact your development cycle or any changes that you need to do. And you can always go to android.com/privacy to find out more privacy best practices and to test out these features. Just change the target level of your app to Android 12, run it on an Android 12 device, and you should be able to validate and test out all the experiences that we talked about. Okay, finally on to the last section that we have, which is about app startup and performance. So this would be the final thing that we'll talk about. And this is also a big major focus for Android 12 last year and this year. So there are four main topics. First up, we have how to improve your app startup. And for this, a new library has been introduced called the macro benchmark it's the macro benchmark library, which helps you profile your apps further and see how you can improve your launch time. Then secondly, there's also a new splash screen that is added to all apps. You also need to ensure that your app links are launched correctly in terms of when you're launching from deep links. And the other thing that has been finally been addressed is something which is launch from notification. So when you slide down the notification shade, you click on a notification, your app launches from there. So these are the four ways your app can end up launching, and we look into how efforts have been made to improve the experience from all these four pillar stones. Okay, So one of the first major changes is the introduction of splash screen for all apps. So by default, the system will use your app's theme background and your app icon and display a smooth animation while your app processes initializing during cold start. As soon as your app's first frame is ready to be drawn, the splash screen will be dismissed, so it takes the user right into your app's experience. The new system window will allow you to customize these parameters, like the ones I talked about, such as by default, it uses a theme background and your app icon and a smooth animation, but you definitely have the possibility to customize these and provide an animated app icon or a different duration or a splash screen, whatever you want to do. So this change is now really important because certain apps or most apps already provide a splash screen. That's a splash experience that is built by the developer, right? And this is a splash screen which is offered by the system. So in some cases, there could be a duplicate effect of a system splash screen and your splash screen. So it's good to check out these changes on Android 12, have a look at your app and see if you could replace your own similar screen, similar splash screen that you have in your app and replace that and offer and use the new splash experience offered by Android 12 directly. So as I mentioned, the app and the background, the icon and the background color can be specified in your app theme using these attributes that I mentioned. And if you'd like to further customize the splash screen, find a reference to the splash screen by using activity.getSplashScreen method. And over there, you can customize it further, for example, by like setting the on-exit animation that you would want. So you can customize a lot of properties. Have a look inside the Android documentation about splash screen. And there's a GitHub user interface sample and a code, not a code lab, it's just a sample to show you how you can use the new splash screen features and what all customizations and configurations are available to you. Also, a good note to add here, I did mention in the slide, yes, here, that the target API level is all, which means as long as your app is on, even if your app targets Android 11, but is running on a user's device with Android 12, this new splash screen will take impact. And there is also a Jetpack library to backport this new splash screen behavior. So have a look out for the Jetpack library for splash screens if you want to add this splash screen behavior to even older Android app versions. Okay, next up, let's look at app links. So app links are not new, right? They've always been there that you can deep link into your app, right? And they were introduced to provide verified links of your apps to bypass the target app dialog. So what this means is if you have a deep link, right, it will match that you in your manifest define that you want to handle this link. So that's just a deep link. But when you have a deep link, the system will pop up this disambiguation chooser, which is which app do you want to use to open this deep link. The next level in that was the app links. App links was a way to tell the system that, hey, I own this domain, so you should not present this disambiguation dialog. Instead, you should launch my app directly, right? So that was the way to do this. But unfortunately, Google found that even though they had this feature to use app links where you can tell the system upfront that launch my app, please don't present this dialog. Some developers kept on making mistakes in how they were setting up this integrity verification with the OS. So in Android 12, first, they've made some changes to reduce this friction resulting from improper setup, and they've provided new tools to detect your app links verification problems upfront. So they've also made changes to, how would I put it? So they've also made changes to improve your app link verification to make it on a link by link basis. So earlier, what was the case is if one of your links failed the verification process in app links, all of them would be considered failed. Now that's no longer the case, right? If one link's failed, it's okay. The other one might still work as long as you've set it up correctly. So next up is Android 12 will take the users directly to the browser for web links if no default app is found. And the third is there are also APIs to check for domain verification states, and if needed, take the user to the system settings to approve domains for your app in case that it needs. Please check out the Android documentation. This topic is slightly tricky. It's a bit difficult to explain over a visual mode here, rather than an on-device code lab kind of an experience. So I would recommend you highly going towards the Android developer side, checking out a few samples to get a much more understanding about the app link improvements you have, especially valuable if when you're trying to deep link to your app, you see this disambiguation dialog and it does not directly launch your app. All right. Next up is notifications, right? So another way to launch your app is via notifications, but there's a common practice in Android, which we would like to call as notification trampoline, which creates a bad experience. What notification trampoline means is that when the user clicks on a notification, there's actually a slight delay between when you clicked on the notification versus when the app opens up. And this is because what happens is that when the user clicks the notification, some of the apps would launch a broadcast receiver or a service to perform some work and then launch the activity. So because there's a broadcast receiver or there's a system service in the middle, there's actually some time consumed before your app activities always launch. So that's the trampoline effect, that there's a delay. And this leads to poor experience like high latency, as you can see in this the animation. So in Android 12, your apps won't be able to launch an activity from a broadcast receiver or a service that was started from a notification. So you can no longer be like, click on a notification, launch a broadcast receiver, and then when the broadcast receiver doesn't work, launch an activity. You can no longer launch anything from broadcast receiver, which was started because of a notification, right? So as soon as the user clicks a notification, you have to launch an activity if your idea is to launch an activity and not just take a background action, right? So another use case, so I forgot to mention. So yeah, change to Android 12 and test out your app, and you should see errors in Logcat if you are using trampoline effects, and you'll have to go ahead and fix that. And before we conclude this section, another use case that is related to performance would be foreground services. And it's very common for smartphone users to be multitasking on their device. You could be listening to a podcast while ordering food or checking the email while helping, a friend with turn-by-turn navigation or using GPS. And if your app has a multitasking use case, it's always better to implement it by using foreground services to implement long-running user-initiated tasks at higher priority. So foreground services are actually designed for these use cases that you want to continue your app to continue running in the foreground per se in multitasking views for the user and allow them to complete their action. So as we mentioned, like foreground services were built for these foreground use cases, but you would see some apps launch foreground services from the background that the user did not take any action, but yet the foreground service got launched. So users can get surprised with this unexpected and non-actionable foreground service and find them very distracting. So, and also when a foreground service is running, they take up valuable system resources and the operating system can't really prioritize resourcing effectively because there's another service which is just being run. In Android 12, foreground services launching from the background is no longer applied. And this will apply to all apps that target Android 12 and above. You cannot launch any foreground service from the background. But you might think, what about a work manager? There's a work manager for background job scheduling. What about if you're using work manager with the foreground service? So for short background tasks that need to be executed as soon as possible, there's a new concept of expedited jobs that your apps can migrate to if you're using foreground services with Work Manager and launching them from the background. These are low latency jobs that can be executed from either foreground or background and will be executed immediately. So yeah, I think with that we get to the end. Some of the main changes that were announced for Android 12, which is out there live in production. Some of your users would already be using your apps on Android 12. So if you haven't migrated to Android 12, please do so soon. We already have Android 13 coming out, so it's highly on time that we start getting our apps up and migrated towards Android 12 before we get bombarded with new changes for Android 13. And I obviously didn't get time to cover all the changes. Like I tried to pick out some of the ones which are popular and more common to most people's apps. There are a few other changes as well, such as changes in the toast style, the way the system toast is displayed. Now the app icon is also displayed in that, or some of the changes in the web view that were added by porting it to by using changes from the Chromium ecosystem added to the web view. So there's a lot of other changes. You should go out and read out on Android 12 in the developer docs to get a full idea. But I hope the ones that I cover the bulk of the changes that would impact you or your app or you as a user of Android per se. Yeah, that's it. That's what I had for today. Yeah. If there are any questions people have about all things Android, Android 12, I'm pretty good and I'm comfortable to answer them.
Друзья, вопросы можете задавать на любом языке, пишите их в чате, мы будем их выводить, отвечать, если нужно, будет перевод с моей стороны. Я пока зачитаю те вопросы, которые мы в канале заранее собрали. Saurabh, thank you very much. It's apparently Android 12 got so many new things, and this guidance is valuable for our region, especially given out of 10 people, 7 wear this Android device in Central Asia, and there is a large shortage of developers, Android developers, and there are a lot of junior developers, mostly they are self-taught. So thank you very much for this. I'm sure there will be a lot of feedback later on. Actually, some people write questions already. I will put their questions, then I will read other questions as well. So there's Aldiar asking, hi Aldiar, привет. Thanks a lot for your report on time, the way usual things. What do you think about Jetpack Compose and KMM? What's better to choose for development?
That's a pretty interesting question there. Look, Jetpack Compose is honestly the future of Android development. It's being heavily invested by Google. A lot of new work and a lot of new approaches towards development is being added to Jetpack Compose. It decouples the UI framework entirely from the Android itself and makes it a configurable and updatable component which developers can bundle in their app. So it provides you consistency across all the different levels of Android, which was not really the case earlier. That if you built a text view or like if you used certain features, they were only available in the newer UI toolkit rather than the older UI toolkit. So Jetpack Compose has that great feature. Now the idea is you're saying if you should use Jetpack Compose and KMM. KMM is Kotlin multi-platform. I think the answer here is a bit tricky because it really depends on your use case, first of all. Like if you're building only that you only want to target Android, that's it, right? You are not looking to build apps for iOS or desktop per se. You only want to target Android. Then I would say Jetpack Compose is great. Just go ahead with it. It targets Android and you should be good with it. But if you're looking to go multi-platform, because the key here is Kotlin multi-platform, right? Then you should probably invest in it. Now, another idea to understand is it does not mean that you cannot use Kotlin multi-platform and Jetpack Compose together. You actually can, because Jetpack Compose is the UI framework and multi-platform is more than just a UI framework, right? Kotlin multi-platform is also allows you to write your business logic, right? So you could essentially write your business logic in Kotlin multi-platform and have Jetpack Compose render the UI for Android, have Swift UI render the UI for iOS, and maybe Compose for desktop render the UI for desktop apps, right? So it's actually possible to mix and match and use both. So I've tried to provide an objective answer here that it's up to your use case. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, then feel free to ask another one and I'll try to clear it up further.
Thank you for this. Пожалуйста, еще вопросы. And meanwhile, we had a poll of questions in advance, and I will read out the top 3 questions. 70% of people voted for a question. If you could describe your typical working week, and I'll explain where this comes from. In previous meetup, many people ask Kırmızı, how do they work with like team leads, senior developers, how tasks are got assigned? Do people use Agile, Scrum? For instance, in Kazakhstan, we use mostly Kanban because for some reason we don't have discipline for Scrum. And this question in this kind, if you could describe a typical working week. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand where that question is coming from because everybody's working style is very different and it reflects on the type of person you are and how you would like to do. So currently my work week mostly involves like there'll be a certain component of the week which is dedicated to meetings, right? Which is about like meeting up with my product team, with my design team, with the tech leads on the platform to try to understand what the current product that we are working on. So if you're working on a feature A, the meetings are regular cadence in line with where's the product heading towards with feature A, what's the development life cycle like. Exactly with design, there'll be questions of around what's the design timelines like, is it ready, or if you have any questions around what the design is being built. So this is a very high level overview meetings, but let's imagine your product kickoff is done and your design kickoff is done, right? So then we enter into something like a sprint planning phase where we would set up a sprint, and it would really depend on your team. Like some teams do 1 week sprint planning, some teams do 2 week sprint planning. So the idea is at the end of the last sprint, you would like just right at the end of this last sprint, you have to make sure that the next sprint, which could be a week or 2, has been set up and work has been allocated to fill up the entire sprint. This is where the job of the team lead or the senior engineer on the team comes in to make sure that they have made sure that everybody on their team has sufficient work for the next sprint, resources have been allocated properly, and work is ready to kick off. So for a senior engineer, there'll be sometimes definitely being spent in the week to work on the sprint planning, making sure you're breaking down the task properly. So let's say you're building a feature and you have to split it down into smaller digestible components, which can be assigned to developers so they can complete one certain section of this work in one sprint, right? So this is one part of the work that would go into the meet. So you have meetings, you have sprint planning. Then personally, I like to set aside something that I call a focus time on my calendar. So what I would do is on a daily basis, I would set about 2 hours or 3 hours per day, which is just blocked off on my calendar as something that I call focus time. Now that is for me is, hey, and this is the time I'm going to put my head down and just write code. Like I'm not going here and being disturbed by meetings or being disturbed by sprint planning or another company level talk or whatever. Like there's so many things that are happening. As I said, you're talking to product people, you're talking to designers, you're also talking to strategy folks to figure out what's the next road mapping and strategy that we go towards, right? So the focus time is really helpful. Like set it aside every day, just jot down, get my work done. And that's the way I try to meet my sprint timelines and deadlines that I've set. Like if I've said I'm completing 10 user stories in this sprint, the focus time is really the time where I put my head down, work, and get that task completed.
That's crucial to get the focus, isn't it? Especially when you're senior as you. Thanks for this, Saurabh. And Konish is asking, what's the most interesting things you've implemented in Twitter app?
Oh, I am not really sure how much of that I can answer, given Twitter might not be comfortable with revealing private information. Also, I joined Twitter recently only. Like I joined them last September. So
let's just skip it.
Yeah, the thing is, because I've joined in September, anything that I have worked on is not yet released. So
Probably
the
the
thing,
next question is also uncommentable, the crash-free percentage
yeah,
of Twitter app. So sorry, Cornish, but yeah.
yeah, it's
I
not
know.
commentable. I can't give the answer, but I can tell you is at the industry standard. Like if you could just Google like industry standard for Android crash-free sessions and percentage, you will get an answer, and Twitter is about there. I can only tell you in comfort that nobody in the Android ecosystem has 100% crash free rate. So if you're worried that your app is not at 100%, do not worry. It's not going to happen. 100% is just not possible. As long as you are like 97, 98, 99, or whatever the industry standard you can Google afterwards is, you're good. You're pretty good. Don't aim for 100%. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. There are some cool features in the NFT avatar, although it's not in Central Asia yet, but it's a very nice development of Twitter. And next question from the poll is, oh, oh my God, what's better, Kotlin or Flutter?
Again, I don't think there's an answer to this to what is better if Kotlin or Flutter. It's your use case. It's your use case on what you want to build. Like if you're focusing on Android per se, right? Or JVM specific stuff you can do with Kotlin. Like if you're only targeting the Android ecosystem, like I always bring it back to the same question. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to build only for Android? Then maybe Kotlin is the better answer here because a Jetpack Compose is available in Kotlin, right? A lot of new feature development is happening in Kotlin. A lot of resources that Google is going to provide you in terms of development and training and code labs will be in Kotlin. Some of the newer features that they will talk about, such as coroutines and DSLs, that will be in Kotlin, right? So if you're only invested in the Android ecosystem, Kotlin, right? But it's never a clear one person answer, right? It's very subjective. What if you're like, I want to build once, but I want to deploy on Android and iOS as well, right? That time, yeah, maybe Flutter is better because your use case supports that better. So look at your use case. My advice would be don't go by the hype of the technology. Look at by your use case. People might talk about Flutter, oh, Flutter is great, or some people might say Kotlin is great. That is essentially because it serves their use case, and in their use case, they feel that language is great. So avoid the hype, look at your use case, and go towards the language which fits your use case.
Thanks. Hype is not always useful. And, друзья, последний вопрос остался из списка. Если у меня кончились вопросы, если у вас есть, задавайте. And the last question from the poll is, well, it's which IDE do you use? Any preferences?
Oh, which IDE do I use?
Yeah.
I use Android Studio. I install both Android Studio and IntelliJ IDEA, their community edition, or sometimes I install. Yeah, their community edition is mostly that I use. So I use one of the two. Most often, I will be using Android Studio, either the stable or the beta channel. Like if I'm doing Android, I definitely rely on Android Studio and not IntelliJ, simply because Google has added a lot of features and plugins to Android Studio to help with Android development. So that's my number one. If I'm doing something else, it could be IntelliJ, but if I'm not doing anything Java or Kotlin related, then Visual Studio Code is where I go next.
Oh, dear Saurabh, thank you very much for your great presentation, a lot of information and a lot of advices. I think many people will watch this in record. And we're basically done for this stream. And I wish you a great weekend and overall this great year. And thank you very much for joining us. and devoting your time. This is shared gratitude from all of our community.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I had a pretty good time as well, Askar. And I hope the presentation was useful and everybody took away something nice and interesting from it.
It was definitely. Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.